Hello and welcome back to Seagulls Central, another video on the channel. Thank you so much for tuning in as always. I really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. It really means a lot. But yeah, I really appreciate you coming back and tuning in for another video. I'm on a roll at the moment. I'm banging them out a couple every week. So it's feeling good and I hope you're enjoying it as much as I'm enjoying doing it. So yeah, it's great to be back. Ahead of a busy period for Brighton and a period where the games do get a little bit tricky, I think, on paper. Everton coming up this weekend, Chelsea in the Forest in the league the following week, and Chelsea in the cup and Chelsea in the league. It goes on and on and on, and we've got some tough fixtures in there. Particularly think about that Forest game just over a week's time. That's going to be really tough. But yeah, we're in decent nick at the moment. I think having 3 wins on the bounce, we're looking like we're in a good moment. And obviously we've got players back from injury, players like Solly March back, Danny Welbeck, back in a kind of properly fit kind of way. We're looking like in an attacking sense, at least, like we can go into this period and actually potentially do some damage and put some teams to the sword. Let's hope we can do that. But I just wanted to jump on for a quick video, really, and just talk about one of the big talking points in the Brighton kind of scene at the moment, which is around the future of Evan Ferguson. I want to get onto a few other topics, talk briefly about Everton before the match on Saturday. I know you may be watching this afterwards, so that will be irrelevant. So that will just be a little footnote at the end. But I want to talk about Julio Enciso's loan out to Ipswich. Obviously Evan Ferguson and the news that Nike have renewed their deal with the Albion until 2030, so another 5 years of Nike as the Albion shirt manufacturer. So we'll get into all of that. But the main reason for this video is to talk about the future of Evan Ferguson. We heard Fabian Hurzeler speaking on Thursday about Evan Ferguson's future. This was obviously after Julio Enciso's move to Ipswich has been confirmed. And he basically said a bit of a kind of half-baked answer, just that, we need to assess him more. He's obviously injured. We need to wait until the end of the window. I think Brighton basically are going to make a decision on the future of Evan Ferguson in the final week of the window, the final sort of 3, 4, 5 days. There's clearly 3 or 4 clubs queuing up to kind of take him. Obviously, we know that West Ham are interested. Clubs from abroad seem to be interested as well. I'm sure there are other Premier League clubs who snap Brighton's hand off to take him for the final 6 months of the season. I'll get onto my stance on it, but generally, none of the clubs that have been floated around with regards to Evan Ferguson's future, none of them really stand out to me. Say you had to let Brighton, send him out on loan. I don't know where I'd want him to go. I wouldn't want him to go to West Ham. West Ham is a good move for him in the sense that they're in the Premier League and actually playing under a former manager. There might be a level of confidence there, other factors to it. But if I'm being completely honest, there's not a chance I want to see Evan Ferguson, potentially helping a rival. And they are still a rival. Obviously, West Ham fans, the most negative of them would probably say they're still in a relegation battle. But there's every chance they could, creep into the kind of top half in the second half of the season. Who knows what Potter can do once they get injured players back? Who knows the kind of form they could put together for the second half of the season. And imagine if it ended up being a situation a bit like, when Palace pipped Brighton to the top half finish on the final day of last season by like 1 point, literally on the final day. Imagine if that were to happen with West Ham. I just think it's too risky. We don't want to go to another Premier League club. Going abroad, I think, would be the best thing for Brighton. The trouble is, what do we want from this loan? Is it a loan to give him just literally more minutes? Is it a loan to kind of put him in a shop window? I'd highly doubt it's that kind of loan. Is it a loan to get him acclimatised to Premier League football? Or is there just some use in banging him out to some kind of Spanish club or German club and hoping that he can bang them in, in a league that's perhaps not as advanced as the Premier League? Now, I'd wonder what he would do. His idea is probably that he just wants to play games, and he's certainly good enough for Brighton at the moment to be playing games. There's no doubt about that. It's the fact that he's been quite unreliable with injuries, if we're being completely honest. Totally in the last kind of year or so, that's been the case. And when he has come back, it's come at times when it's been difficult to kind of justify dropping a player like Danny Welbeck or dropping a player like João Pedro. So, where's he at? He's certainly good enough to start for this club. In an ideal world, maybe he'd have a loan until the end of the season, come back for pre-season, and then, over that summer period, we really see the best of him. We can go into next season with him as a fit and firing striker. What it would do, it would ease the burden on a player like Danny Welbeck. It would ease the burden on even João Pedro. When we lost him for a matter of months earlier in the season, we looked like a side, he really missed a focal point. Obviously, Danny Welbeck filled in very, very well in stages, but I've always thought we look a better side when we've got a player like João Pedro. So anyway, the point I'm making is I think if Evan Ferguson could have a pre-season to kind of get himself together, the worry is I think the club will probably just be thinking long term with him. Is he going to be a player who's going to be blighted with injuries his whole career? Is he going to be a player who, in the long term, actually, if Man United or Chelsea or whoever came in with like an £80 million, £70 million offer, say this summer, next January, would you take it? I guess that would be the question that Brighton are thinking. Do we want to try and see the best of him more for Brighton, and actually there comes a point when you need to keep your best players in order to kick on? Well, we're doing that at the moment, absolutely. Or a bit like, when they sell a player like Robert Sanchez, and Chelsea fans are going, we stole your number one. But actually Brighton are kind of 2 steps ahead, and they realise, actually, we can upgrade on this. This is good money for the situation. What would you think as a Brighton fan? This guy's obviously generational, but are we going to see the best of him in a Brighton shirt if the injuries are going to be such an issue for him? I love him as a player. In an ideal world, he'd be playing every week for Brighton. But if we can't rely on him, and an offer worth 60, 70, 80 million quid comes in the summer, I don't know, did Brighton take that? The trouble would be, in 5 years' time, let's say, when he's 25 years old or whatever, and he's banging them in left, right and centre for Man United or something, and we're relegated to the Championship. Now I'm joking, but we're struggling for a striking option. It'd be annoying. It would be like another Gyökeres situation. I suppose my view would maybe be you try and see what you can get from him at the club, in the Brighton squad until the end of the season. Then you assess things in the summer. You assess if he has a strong finish to the season, how he's looking in pre-season, and you sort of take it from there. The level by which the kind of interest is truly genuine with these other clubs. Because, if we're being completely honest, he's probably the best. No, he's not. He's not the best striker at the club. He's probably the best finisher at the club, isn't he? He's probably the best natural finisher at the club. Pedro, with that multifaceted kind of ability to do so many different things, to hold the ball up, to run in behind, to bully defenders, to be a fox in the box and have the ball land to him and just finish it. Be that poacher style of and actually a really good finisher as well, João Pedro. You've got Danny Welbeck, whose role has changed so much. He can get Brighton up the pitch. His hold-up play is brilliant. His strength is fantastic. He's still got a bit of pace to run in behind. Actually, but finishing probably not his ultimate kind of trait. It never was, even at Man United, Arsenal. It was never a potent finisher, was he? It was more about being on the shoulder of the last man, getting in behind, making the runs. Obviously, that game has not changed for a while back. So Ferguson probably is the best finisher at the club, and potentially a lethal generational finisher and striker going forward. So it probably is too much of a risk, isn't it, to sell him? I don't know. I think if it were me, I think it would be very unlikely I'd be letting Evan Ferguson go between now and the end of the January transfer window, particularly since Julio and Cesar has obviously been a player who Brighton have let go on loan in the last couple of days or so, obviously joining Ipswich on his 21st birthday. A loan move which I think will actually be very good for him. But if we keep it in the context of Evan Ferguson, what happens if, Danny Welbeck's injured, in the next game? We've got João Pedro only, and then we're playing him in the cup. We're playing him every game in the league. I guess the beauty of Brighton at the moment is we've got so many attackers and we've got so many options. But having that focal point, having a pure striker, I think is a really important part to that hurzeler system. Having like 10s that can play off him, having wingers that can play off him. We saw worked so well at Man United, where Danny Welbeck was literally that focal point. Yeah, he didn't get a goal, but was was the main man in terms of building us up the pitch, getting us up the pitch, even by dribbling us up the pitch and allowing those two wingers to run beyond him and get him behind. And, it's tough because we would need someone like Evan Ferguson. The point that Fabian Hurzeler's made, and I do get this to be fair, is that, he's not been a part of the squad in the last, 6-9 months since Fabian Hurzeler's been here. We've not really seen the best of him. He was out with an injury for a long time, came back, struggled to get on the side, scored a couple of goals here and there, has looked good. But he said he alluded to it pretty much essentially said it outright in the press conference, which was that, he doesn't quite understand the way that I want Brighton to play yet because he's not been around enough to kind of understand it. He spent so long on the sidelines. So I think for Fabian Hurzeler, maybe he'll be thinking having him around in the second half of the season, it's worth it just to get him up to speed. There's no doubt about it. He's a player who Fabian Hurzeler would love. The club love him. But, is it right now that he's going to be starting? No, of course it's not. Is it in 2 months' time, though, in March, April, when we're coming to the business end of the season and we might have an injury? We're going to need him, aren't we? And with a player who's got such a quality finishing ability and is still so young, I think we take longer. I think if it were me, I'd take longer to manage him out of this injury because I think he's still going to be out for, a little period. And we can deal with it ourselves. We can have him when it matters in that second half of the season. Because who knows? Imagine if we lost Jorginho Rota, for the second half of the season next week. We'd be, we'd not be screwed. We've got so many options. But suddenly letting out an Encisa or an Evan Ferguson would look a lot more risky. Now, I'm certainly prepared to let someone like Encisa go out because I can understand why actually, that makes sense for him. He's a player who I don't think Fabian Hurzeler massively backs. We've seen him play the odd game, but he still looks like a player who is quite raw and does need to learn, how to play in that system a little bit better. We see him, with that funny ability to just take shots off left, right and centre, wherever he is on the pitch. They're thunderbolt shots. But actually, is that often the best thing for the team? And I think you've seen him sometimes with his attitude. He slumps his shoulders a little bit. I think just getting the minutes under his belt, under a brilliant coach in Kieran McKenna. I think the fact as well that he's going to a coach in Kieran McKenna who actually Brighton, made no secret. Well, they did try. They never really brought it up publicly, but it was made no secret by the press that, Kieran McKenna was the first choice from the club to replace Roberto De Zerbi last summer. He obviously turned Brighton down to stay at Ipswich. So I think the club that will have been a big part of why I believe that Julian Cisse has gone to Ipswich Town. Of course, he's still playing in the Premier League. They're not a team who's necessarily going to be affecting Brighton's chances of finishing in the top 10 or Europe this season. Of course, they're not. And, he's playing under a manager who they back. He had the option to go to Borussia Dortmund. He had the option to go to Atlanta, apparently. Even Man United coming in at the last minute. I think the fact that Kieran McKenna's the coach there, there's so many reasons. It does seem like a very good loan for him. But I think that would have been a massive contributing factor in why they've given the loan to, Julian Cisse to go to Ipswich Town. Because, we've seen what's happened when we've let someone like Facundo Buonanotte go on. Admittedly, in the last few weeks, the last month or so since Ruud van Nistelrooy's come in, he's actually seen his minutes drop a little bit. But he's a player who's when you look at his goal and assists, is actually still very impressive and is up there with some of the Brighton players in terms of the goal and assists that we've contributed in terms of our players this season. He would compare very favourably amongst our players that we've had at the club. So, that shows the benefit that the loan can do for a young player. Now, I think both of those players have kind of suffered from the fact that Brighton spent so big in the summer and spent so big on attackers, wingers, attacking midfielders. Gruder came in, you had Matt O'Reilly come in, Rutter, Minteh. So many players came in those attacking positions who actually leave players like Encisa, leave players like Facundo Buonanotte, leave players like Evan Ferguson in difficult positions where actually they're having to think, oh God, do I need a loan here? And actually, 2 years ago, a year ago, under the first season of De Zerbi, those players were actually very important in all of the games. I remember, Facundo Buonanotte played a lot of games, even last season for Brighton, when we had to rely on him a lot. So it shows how much we've developed. But actually, I do think that this move for Encisa is very good. The only thing that worries me about the Encisa situation is the murmurings going on around his contract at the moment. Obviously, his contract's up June 2026. And the reports are that he's essentially refusing to sign a new contract. So I think the idea with Enciso's loan would have been what they do, the club, with most dealings, happen with Facundo Buonanotte in terms of getting him out on loan and getting him to sign a new deal, because with only 18 months left on his deal, by the time he comes back onto the Ipswich loan, he's only going to have a year left. And at 21 years old, only having a year left on your deal, potentially making a mark in the Premier League, that's a very, very good position for a buying club to be in, and puts Brighton in a slightly difficult position. Now, I guess what the club will be saying to him is, you've seen the pathway and you've seen what can happen if you do sign a deal with us. It provides us with the security of getting the money for you. It provides you with it doesn't damage your chances of getting a move in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. And we saw it with Alexis McAllister. We've seen it even with Caicedo, where he signed a contract not long before he went in the summer. I think it was 6 months beforehand. And it put Brighton in a much stronger position to kind of get the money that they want for their move. Now, I wonder how difficult his camp will be. I think I've seen Brighton fans on social media saying, if it's going to be this difficult, let's just cut our losses and let them go in the summer. Now, I can see why that might happen, but there's a massive talent there. I was obviously working at TalkSport. I remember having a conversation with Martin Keown probably a year ago, where we were talking about NC. So when would it have been? No, it's probably almost 2 years ago. I think it was after he scored that goal against Man City at the Amex. I think it would have been 2023. And he said he thinks that Julio Enciso is the best young talent that Brighton have at the club. Now, at the time, it was very different, the landscape of the young players we had. Ferguson had obviously only broken through in the 6 months prior to that. Buonanotte had only been signed in that January. Obviously, now looks very different. But, for a player of his stature to be mentioning that, saying he thinks is, considering the context of all the fabulous young players we had. And it goes to show, the way he's rated in the game. And he clearly is a fabulous player. And, for Ipswich, it's a fantastic move, because they've actually now got some pretty good options. Obviously signing Jadon Philogene as well in the summer, playing, those two playing off someone like Liam Delap. They've got Hutchinson as well. They've got some really nice players which they can rely on. Now, I don't necessarily think they're going to stay up. I think it will be still very difficult for them. I think that's quite bad for the Premier League, to be honest. We do see all three promoted clubs get relegated. However, for Julio Enciso playing every week, hopefully starting this weekend against Liverpool, gives him a great opportunity to kind of stake his claim in the second half of the season. So I'll leave it at that. But if we move on to the news just around the Nike deal, it's just a quick one I want to touch on, because it's raised a few talking points among the fan base in the last day or so since it's been announced. And the news is basically that Nike are extending their sponsorship of Brighton's kits for the next 5 years until 2030. For me, I'll be really honest, I don't really mind. I do like buying Brighton kits at the start of every season. I do like doing that, having them to wear around the house and stuff. But ultimately, I don't really, really mind. I know that obviously Nike, they make the templates for all the different clubs. We have the same away kit as like Birmingham, and we've previously had the same home kit as like Atletico Madrid, and all the templates, they just copy and paste it. I get it. I do get it. However, and I think, to be honest, if it was up to me, I would have loved to be with a club like with a brand like Adidas. I think their kits are so nice, so smart, and just classic. And you get individual designs, it seems like, from them. But what it seems like is, from the statement, from what I've read, is it looks like Brighton are now part of a kind of, they might have a bit more of an advanced deal in terms of what Nike are offering, because the club in their statement said that supporters will be now able to choose from a kind of more extensive range of items, I guess. So whether that means that, because I think some clubs are down as like, bespoke clubs where they actually make proper kits for you, as opposed to just putting you in the templates of all their other clubs. So hopefully that would be the case. I mean, the Nike sponsorship's probably been going now for like 10 years, hasn't it, really? Over that now. They've been a really, really strong partner for the club commercially. So, you'd like to think maybe we can see that, and maybe the club are kind of responding to a bit of fan feedback on that, but it'd be interesting to see. And then, of course, this weekend, you might be watching it after the Everton game, so I'm sorry if you do, but Everton this weekend, David Moyes, obviously after that fantastic result that they got last weekend against Tottenham, I think it's going to be a really tough game. It's been a fixture historically for Brighton in the last 3-4 years where Brighton have struggled. Obviously, we've had our results away from home, and obviously had it this season away from home. Was it Fabian Hurzeler's literally first game when we won that 4-0? But I'm still scarred by Everton coming to the Amex the last 2 or 3 seasons under Sean Dyche. Now, we're fortunate that Sean Dyche is no longer there, but of course, there's another British manager in the dugout. And it just worries me. It always worries me coming up against Everton at the Amex. I've got so many kind of bad memories of it. From a Brighton perspective, we're going to be without Lewis Dunk. We're also going to be without Matt O'Reilly. Those two players, Fabian Hurzeler said, have small muscle injuries. I think one's an ankle and one's an... Oh, no, it wouldn't have... I can't remember. Maybe hamstring was one of them. Anyway, small injuries. So they might be available. They might be available for the next game. It looks like it's not going to be too big of a deal. Hinshaw on his way back, not available just yet, I don't think. But yeah, there are options for Brighton. Obviously, Gruden not playing at Old Trafford, but Minteh looking so fantastic. You'd hope he'd keep his place. But then what happens with Rutter? Obviously, he came on and played so well at Man United. For me, I'd go unchanged. I think that was a really, really strong side. Obviously, Lewis Dunk will have to come out. Adam Webster will have to come in. But to be honest, after seeing him against Norwich, after seeing him in some other games, I've been very impressed with actually Adam Webster in the last month or so. I think we've really seen the best of him. Where was it? We saw him in an away game. Am I going mad? What was the game before Man United? I can't remember. But Adam Webster, Ipswich. Yeah, was it Ipswich? Yeah. And basically Adam Webster played really well in that game. Yeah, it was Ipswich. He played really well in that game. So hopefully we can see him back in at Everton if Lewis Dunk is out and he'll have a good performance. So yeah, I'll be back after them again, Everton game to review that. I'll be back with all the talking points at the end of the weekend and into next week. And, as always, I love kind of getting into all the different topics, whether it's just a general one like this around our signings and the future of certain players at the club, whether it's reacting to games. Please let me know in the comments what you prefer, what kind of feel you prefer. But hopefully, this feels like it's all going quite nicely, so I hope you're enjoying it. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please drop a subscription if you haven't already and put a comment below. Let me know if you disagree or agree with me. It helps me a lot to kind of get the comments down there. I really appreciate it. And I will see you after the Everton game where we hopefully have another 3 points in our big old Premier League bag. Thank you very much for watching. And as always, up the Albion.